Don't look at me like that. You people always think you're smarter than the law.
I'm asking respectfully, what is the legal reason for this stop?
Legal reason, please. You should be grateful we're even explaining anything to you.
I want your badge numbers, and I want them now.
Oh, wow, we got ourselves a little lawyer.
The metallic taste of fear was thick in the air as the patrol car's lights flashed red and blue across the quiet, empty highway. A black woman in her mid-50s eased her older sedan to the shoulder, hands on the wheel, heart pounding, but not from guilt. The officer approaching her window, gun already at his side, smirked with the kind of arrogance that comes from thinking nobody can challenge them. License and registration. Now, he barked. Her eyes met his, steady, calm, calculating. In that moment, she knew one thing. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Before we go further into what happens next, take a moment to comment below where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button too, because this story isn't just about one person. It's about seeing truth in the face of power. She handed over her documents without a word. The officer glanced at them, then back at her, the smirk widening. "You people think you're smarter than us," he said under his breath, loud enough for her to hear. "I'm happy to provide my information," she replied evenly, "but I'd also like your badge number." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and that's when the situation started to spiral. The second officer, standing by the passenger side, scoffed. "Oh, look at her, getting sassy. Probably thinks she's untouchable." Her hands stayed visible on the steering wheel. She had faced hostility before, but this was different. She was on the wrong side of their assumptions about race, and they wanted to assert control. Reaching for something, the second officer shouted suddenly. Everything exploded in a blur. Her door was yanked open. Pain shot through her shoulder as the officers forced her out of the car. Cold metal clamped down on her wrists. They shoved her against the side of the vehicle. The world narrowed to the sting of the handcuffs, the harsh commands, and the creeping realization that they had no interest in justice, only control. "You're resisting," one said, reading accusations like a script. "You're disrespecting us." Her head stayed high. She recorded every detail in her mind, their words, their gestures, their tone. Every illegal, excessive move became a mental ledger. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to meet consequences far beyond their understanding. A passing teenager slowed, phone in hand, filming. The officers noticed and barked orders, but she memorized the license plate and made a mental note. Evidence, every detail counted. The patrol car ride was silent, except for their whispered racial jabs. "Designer purse. Nice car. Must be a good job." She didn't answer. She let them reveal themselves, piece by piece, like criminals unraveling before an invisible jury. At the station, the fluorescent lights cast a sickly glow. Old linoleum floors, water-stained ceiling tiles, and a Confederate mug on the front desk. Everything screamed a small-town culture unchallenged by accountability. She was processed with contempt, her handcuffs finally removed in a cell with two other black detainees. One young woman introduced herself, wary. "I'm Keisha. This is Jamal." Keisha's voice cracked as she described her ordeal. Accused of theft at a boutique despite showing a receipt. Jamal, only 19, had been handcuffed for waiting for a ride after work, his badge and explanation ignored. She listened, asking careful questions, noting patterns. Same officers. Same abuse. Same disregard for rights. And she saw it clearly. This wasn't just about her traffic stop. This was a systemic problem, a network of intimidation built into the very way the town ran. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. A man with a sheriff's star, his gray hair and weathered face marking authority, stopped before the cell. Well, what have we here?" "Giving our officers trouble." Her voice was calm, deliberate. "I'd like to make a phone call, Chief." "Privilege, not a right," he replied, though she knew it was false. "Paperwork first." The officers smiled smugly. Their game was working, until it wasn't. She remained composed, revealing nothing, but filing every reaction in her mind. Hours passed. She watched them, listened. Discussions of quotas. Comments about targeting Oakwood, a historically black neighborhood. Each word, each glance, a brick in the foundation of evidence she was building. A young officer approached, different from the others. Professional, careful, respectful. His eyes widened as he read her ID. "You're a federal judge?" Silence fell over the station. Chief Hargrove and the two officers froze. Panic replaced arrogance. Suddenly, their carefully maintained control crumbled. "Judge Mitchell," the chief shouted, forcing a smile that couldn't hide his fear. What a misunderstanding. She didn't rise. She didn't apologize. She simply observed. Every move, every gesture, every desperate attempt to cover their misconduct, documented in real time. Later, at her sister's house in the quiet outskirts of town, she debriefed. Her sister, a community organizer, had long documented cases like this. Files, interviews, photos, evidence, years of it. Together, they started connecting the dots. Oakwood was under siege. Police harassment, code enforcement abuse, property pressure. Developers buying low, judges rubber stamping. The system, stacked against black residents, suddenly made sense. And now she had the authority and resources to fight back. That night, as she scored records and statistics, every phone call, every notice, every news article added pieces to the puzzle. Retaliation was swift. Building code violations appeared at her sister's center. Police visited residents who had witnessed her ordeal. The conspirators were trying to move fast, to intimidate, to silence, but they had underestimated the power of her knowledge, her position, and her careful strategy. And as she prepared for the coming days, one thought stayed in her mind. The people who believed they could mock and control her had no idea they were about to face the consequences of underestimating a federal judge. The next morning, the quiet in Oakwood was a lie. From her sister's living room window, she could see the same dark sedan parked across the street. Its engine idled softly, driver eyes hidden behind dark tint. Someone was watching. She didn't panic. Years on the bench had trained her for high-pressure situations, for reading people, for seeing patterns others missed. She moved carefully, checking locks, noting angles, timing patrol shifts. Every detail was evidence, every observation a tool. Her sister brought breakfast, her voice low. "They're not going to stop. You saw how fast they acted yesterday. They're scrambling to cover themselves." "I know," she said, calm but firm. "We're going to make sure the truth is undeniable. They've underestimated us from the start." After breakfast, she drove to Oakwood to talk to residents. The same streets she had driven down during the stop now seemed charged, full of stories waiting to be told. She knocked on doors, introduced herself simply as Eleanor, a concerned federal attorney, not yet revealing her judge identity, and asked about police behavior. Mrs. Lawn, an elderly woman, shook as she spoke. "They've been stopping cars, issuing fines for trash in the yard, things that aren't even violations. My grandson was taken once for walking home from the store." Eleanor took notes meticulously, every name, every date, every claim. She also checked property records, noting how quickly developers had acquired homes in Oakwood. The pattern was clear. Pressure to sell, intimidation to force compliance, and a legal system that looked the other way. She returned home as the sun dipped low, her mind racing. The dark sedan followed her slowly, keeping distance. Then, the first direct warning came, a brick through the living room window. A note taped to it read, "Mind your own business." Her sister grabbed the shard of glass and pressed it into her hand. "They're serious. This isn't a joke." "It's serious," Eleanor agreed. "And that's why we do this right. We document, we plan, we protect people." Her phone buzzed. It was Officer Daniels, the young officer who had recognized her at the station. He wanted to meet again, to share what he had discovered internally. Under the cover of darkness, they met in a public lot, her sister nearby as backup. Daniels was nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "I've seen everything," he whispered. "Hargrove, Rollins, Peterson. They get orders from Crawford and Crane. Traffic stops, code violations, property pressure. It's all coordinated." He handed her a flash drive. "This has internal emails, dashcam footage that was supposed to disappear, reports they tried to cover up. You're the only one who can do anything with it without getting shut down immediately." Eleanor's fingers brushed the device lightly. This was the breakthrough they had needed. "We'll protect you," she said. "But we have to move carefully." The next morning, she returned to Oakwood for more documentation. A group of residents had gathered, frustrated, scared, but willing to share. One by one, stories poured out. Illegal stops, fines for minor violations, harassment from officers who knew their names and addresses. They spoke quietly, but Eleanor recorded everything. Back at the sisters' house, Eleanor and Patricia mapped it all out. Pins on a map marked each incident, each person affected. The patterns overlapped. Rollins and Bennett repeatedly, code enforcement notices clustering around properties acquired by Crane Developments. "This is bigger than I thought," Patricia said, eyes scanning the map. "It's not just harassment. It's a coordinated push to take the neighborhood." Eleanor nodded. "And now we have Daniels on our side. We can prove it." Their plans were interrupted by a knock at the door. The same dark sedan had pulled up, engine running. The driver stayed inside, staring. Eleanor didn't flinch. "It's intimidation," she said. "Nothing more. But we're ready." She called Daniels, arranging a secure meeting for him to drop off more evidence. Every step was careful. Every move accounted for. She had faced hostile judges, powerful corporations, and angry lawyers, but this was different. This was personal. They were trying to scare ordinary people out of their homes. By late afternoon, Eleanor had organized a meeting with a trusted civil rights lawyer from outside the area. Damon Reynolds, a mid-40s attorney with a history of fighting police misconduct, sat across from her, reviewing the files. "I've seen corruption before," he said, shaking his head. "But this is systematic. You weren't just stopped. You walked into the middle of an entire machine built to intimidate a community." Eleanor's eyes were steady. "Then we break the machine. Carefully. Legally. And we protect everyone involved." Reynolds nodded. "We'll need witness statements, dashcam footage, every single document we can get. And we have to prepare for backlash. These people won't give up without a fight." That night, they planned the next step. Collecting evidence from residents, documenting patterns, and carefully controlling who knew what. The dark sedan remained parked nearby, but Eleanor hardly noticed. Her mind was focused on strategy, not fear. Then came the most intense conversation yet, between Eleanor and Rollins, though not in person. A call she traced through Daniels, using official channels, gave her a chance to confront him. "I know you think you're untouchable," she said, voice calm but firm. "All of your actions, every violation, every false charge, it's documented. Every resident you harassed has a record of it. You can't erase this." Rollins' voice, cracking with disbelief, answered, Who are you really? You're not. You're a judge?" "Yes," she said, "and now the law sees everything you've done, and it will speak for itself." The line went silent. Fear replaced arrogance. It was the first crack in the wall of control they had built over Oakwood. That night, Eleanor and Patricia reviewed the day's progress. Residents had begun to trust them. Daniels was providing insider information, and Reynolds was ready to file initial complaints once they had irrefutable evidence. The momentum had shifted. But Eleanor knew one thing. The corrupt network she was up against wouldn't give up quietly. Hargrove, Rollins, Bennett, Crawford, and Crane. They would try to fight back. They had power, influence, and money. But she had the law, the truth, and the determination to protect an entire neighborhood from being destroyed. And that meant the next days would be the most dangerous yet. The morning fog clung to Oakwood like a warning. Eleanor drove slowly through the neighborhood, noting which homes had fresh notices from code enforcement, which streets had the familiar patrolling officers, and which residents avoided looking outside. Every stop, every glance, was part of the story she was documenting. She parked near a row of townhouses and stepped out, notebook in hand. Residents began to gather, hushed voices carrying in the early light. One young man, trembling, stepped forward. They came again last night. Demanded to see IDs, said we were under investigation for code violations that don't even exist. Eleanor nodded, pen moving across the page. You're safe talking here. We're documenting everything. Nothing goes unrecorded. The dark set and reappeared, slow this time, as if testing them. Eleanor made eye contact with the driver. He nodded slightly, almost acknowledging her awareness. She didn't flinch. She'd seen intimidation before, and she knew how to respond. Calmly, strategically, and without panic. Back at her sister's house, Daniels arrived with more evidence. Internal emails, he said, handing her a folder. Hargrove gave direct instructions to increase stops and fines in Oakwood. He's coordinating with Crawford and Crane. It's all documented here. Patricia leaned over the folder. So it's not random. They've been planning this? Yes, Eleanor said. And now we can prove it. Eleanor spent hours cross-referencing addresses, dates, and incidents. The evidence painted a clear, chilling picture. Officers were acting on orders to intimidate residents, judges were approving fines without cause, and developers were buying properties at a fraction of their value, effectively driving out the black community. That evening, a knock at the door. It was Jamal, one of the young men from the cell with her days ago. His eyes were wide with fear. They're coming for my family. They said we'd be next if anyone spoke out. Eleanor guided him inside. We'll protect you, she said. We have witnesses, documentation, everything you need to prove what's happening. We just have to act carefully. The most intense moment came later that night, when Daniels delivered the final piece of evidence. Dashcam footage showing Rollins and Bennett harassing multiple residents, falsifying reports, and threatening families. Eleanor replayed the footage, pausing at each frame, making note of every illegal action. This is everything we need, she said. Once this goes to Reynolds, it will be impossible for them to deny. Then came the confrontation. Eleanor called Rollins, using channels that kept her safe but allowed her voice to reach him directly. Officer Rollins, she said, calm but commanding, you have been recorded. Every stop, every false charge, every threat. Do you understand what you've done? I don't. Rollins stammered, his arrogance gone, replaced with panic. Yes, she continued, and it will be addressed. Every victim you harassed, every family you intimidated, will have justice. You can't hide behind your badge or your small-town connections. The law sees everything now. The line went silent. Eleanor knew she had broken the illusion of invincibility that kept officers like Rollins in control. The next morning, Oakwood residents began to show signs of hope. Eleanor, her sister, and Daniels organized a small community meeting in a church basement. Residents shared their stories, each one recorded and documented. The mood was tense, but determined. Reynolds joined via phone, reviewing notes in real time. This is the strongest case I've ever seen, he said. We have names, dates, direct evidence of abuse, falsified reports, and internal communications proving coordination. We can't lose. But danger was never far. That afternoon, Eleanor noticed someone taking photos from a distance. She recognized the tactics, intimidation, surveillance, trying to scare witnesses into silence. She instructed Patricia to alert neighbors and keep children inside. "They're afraid of the truth being revealed," Eleanor said. "We need to make sure they don't succeed." The day ended with Eleanor sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing every email, document, and video. She made a plan for filing complaints with the State Attorney General, the Department of Justice, and civil rights groups. Each step had to be calculated. One misstep could put residents or Daniels at risk. Late that night, she received a call from Keisha. "They came to my workplace, threatened me, said I better stop helping you or I'll lose my job." Eleanor's voice was steady. "Keisha, we've anticipated this. You're safe. We have evidence, witnesses, and a plan. Keep detailed notes and trust that this ends with accountability, not punishment for you." By the next day, Eleanor's strategy began to work. Complaints filed, protected witnesses, and documented evidence made it impossible for Hargrove, Rollins, and Crawford to continue their harassment without scrutiny. News outlets were contacted carefully, social media leveraged for attention, but done in a controlled way to protect those involved. And yet, the tension remained. Every shadow, every car, every unknown face in Oakwood was a potential threat. Eleanor moved methodically, training residents on documenting incidents, securing their homes, and preparing for intimidation. The tipping point came when Daniels discovered emails revealing a plan to file false charges against multiple residents to undermine their credibility. Eleanor acted immediately, contacting Reynolds and preparing legal protection for the community. One final conversation with Rollins, via secured channels, cemented the shift. "You think you can stop us?" Rollins said, voice shaking. "We run this town." "Not anymore," Eleanor replied firmly. "The law is watching. Every action you take from this point forward is documented. You are accountable." Silence. Fear. The illusion of control shattered. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at the courthouse in the city, far enough from Oakwood to avoid immediate interference. Reynolds and Daniels were waiting, along with a small team of civil rights investigators. The evidence she and her sister had gathered, combined with Daniels' insider information, formed an airtight case. Reynolds spoke first. "With this, we can file complaints against Hargrove, Rollins, Bennett, Crawford, and even tie Crane Developments to the harassment campaign. This is solid. The DOJ will have to take notice." Eleanor nodded, her mind already thinking steps ahead. "We protect the residents first. Then we ensure accountability for those responsible." The first legal filings went out that afternoon. Official complaints, detailed documentation, and sworn witness statements were sent to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and the State Attorney General's office. Copies were secured with timestamps, emails, and confirmation receipts. Every step was designed to prevent cover-ups. Meanwhile, back in Oakwood, residents noticed a change. Officers no longer hovered in front of homes. Code enforcement notices stopped appearing. For the first time in years, people felt safe to leave their doors open and talk to neighbors. That evening, Eleanor and Daniels reviewed more internal communications, revealing that Hargrove and Crawford were panicking. Messages intercepted showed their fear of federal intervention. "We have to contain this," Crawford wrote to Hargrove. "She knows too much. She will ruin everything if she continues." Eleanor leaned back. They finally realized the law works against them, not for them. The first confrontation happened when Rollins tried to intimidate a resident over a minor, fabricated violation. Daniels and Reynolds intervened immediately, presenting documented evidence of past misconduct and the ongoing federal investigation. Rollins froze. The years of arrogance, the casual abuse, the false charges, they all ended here. A few days later, Chief Hargrove received an official summons. Crawford and Crane were informed of federal oversight into Oakwood's property dealings and the systematic harassment of residents. The pressure was immediate. Their local networks were powerless to shield them. Eleanor returned to Oakwood, walking through the streets she had once feared. Neighbors greeted her with cautious smiles, grateful for the protection and courage she had brought. "We thought nobody cared," one elderly man said, "but you showed us we weren't alone." At the same time, Daniels provided more footage and emails directly to the DOJ, ensuring that every attempt at intimidation, falsification, or harassment was on record. "They tried to make us scared," he said. "But now, they're the ones who are scared." The most intense confrontation came when Crawford himself appeared in Oakwood, attempting to meet Eleanor privately. She agreed, but only in a controlled environment with Reynolds present. "You have no idea what you're doing," Crawford said, trying to maintain authority. "These residents will fight back, and the political fallout." "I understand perfectly," Eleanor interrupted. "I'm here to ensure the law is applied fairly. Your connections, your influence, and your attempts to silence people will not stop this. Every action you've taken is documented. Every resident has a record of harassment. Justice will be served." Crawford's face paled. For the first time, he realized that the federal judge he had underestimated had complete control over the legal narrative, and there was no way to manipulate it. Within a week, the DOJ opened a full investigation. Officers Rollins and Bennett were placed on administrative leave pending internal review. Hargrove faced suspension. Crane's development plans were frozen while federal authorities audited property acquisitions and coercion tactics. Eleanor and Patricia worked closely with residents to ensure their safety and provide support for any testimony needed. Notices of harassment were compiled, and all Oakwood residents affected were given instructions on reporting further incidents. The first public breakthrough came when the local news, previously silenced, ran a story about federal oversight in Oakwood. The article detailed the complaints, the evidence, and the residents' courage. It highlighted Eleanor's role without revealing her judicial identity too publicly, protecting her from local retaliation while making it clear that accountability was underway. Eleanor knew this was only the beginning. She continued to monitor Oakwood, checking on residents, ensuring that enforcement agencies upheld their responsibilities. Slowly, the neighborhood began to feel like home again, no longer overshadowed by fear. The final confrontation with Rollins was brief but decisive. He tried to argue in court that his actions had been justified, but the evidence was overwhelming. Dashcam footage, internal emails, sworn testimonies from residents, and Daniels' insider information. The presiding judge, seeing the pattern of coordinated abuse, ruled against him, imposing termination and permanent restrictions on law enforcement duties. Bennett, Hargrove, and Crawford faced similar fates. Their reputations and careers were destroyed by the undeniable evidence Eleanor had meticulously collected. Crane's development plans were halted, his coercive property acquisitions voided. The residents of Oakwood finally had control over their neighborhood again. In the quiet aftermath, Eleanor sat at her sister's kitchen table, reflecting on the journey. "It wasn't just about me," she said. "It was about them, every person who suffered, every voice that was silenced." Patricia nodded. "And now they're heard." Finally. Eleanor smiled, a rare moment of relief washing over her. She had used her position not to protect herself alone, but to defend an entire community. The law, justice, and truth had prevailed. The dark set-in never returned. Oakwood began to heal. Families could live without fear, children could play in the streets, and residents could once again trust the people sworn to protect them.